All right, it is September 20th. Next week we have Digital 360 Summit. It is another glorious Wednesday. The temperature is 93 degrees. A lot of people wearing jackets, Texas. They're not used to this cold weather. We have a great guest, and we have the crew here today. But before we get rolling, John, do you have your guitar nearby?
I do. Was it wonderful for you? And was it holy? It was for me. You feel the hand of destiny that was guiding us together. You were young enough to dream, and I was old enough to try something new. And I'm so glad that I danced with you. Moment of forever.
All right. Woo. Well, it's a interesting week before Digital 360 Summit. How you doing, John Butler?
I'm doing fine. I spent a lot of my time with the guys and ladies that built Austin. My fellows, we had fellows around the globe, and they came into town and for a great discussion on where Memphis was and where was Texas going and where was Austin going. Everything from a big dig in Austin to go underneath the I-35 and make that land for the University of Texas at Austin, to the impact of AI on the future. But more importantly, if you look at all the federal money that's coming down the pike for broadband and for infrastructure, how should the city of Austin grow, and how should it interact with the region around it? So that was good. And of course, it all comes to energy. It all comes to the idea of energy. And I'm glad we have a great guest here because, John, I'm always concerned about the quantification monetarily of the science, right? So it's been a good day. We had a little break from the heat. It's still hot, but it's 92, so I've got my jacket on. That's down from 104. The world itself is still the world, and again, it's revolving around energy, and all the stuff about electricity and etc. I think the price for a barrel of oil is up to $100 now, which means there should be more drilling for petroleum. So I see this conflict between the new way, okay, let's buy an electric car, but let's save energy, let's save electricity that's going on. And I won't comment on the elections that's coming up, and I won't comment on the court case that took place in Texas with our attorney general. But it's been interesting, and it's a lot of ideas that's going on, Andres. I mean, people are trying to come up with ideas to create jobs with the influence of all the technology that's coming. And then, of course, on top of all of that, do people want to go to work or do they want to stay home? Can you command people to go to work in this identity crisis community that we live in? So it's the same old stuff, warmed over with a little bit extra.
Right. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you very much. I'm in Washington. I was in for the Alliance to Save Energy dinner last night, and I've got a whole series of webinars and meetings while I'm here.
All right. Well, we have a great guest today. His name is John Sullivan, and he's the Senior Vice President of Revenue Operations for Lit Communities. John, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Sure. Tell us, John, first things first, what's Lit Communities? What are you guys up to?
Yeah, so Lit Communities, we were founded back in 2019, really with the goal of connecting underserved communities. I've been with the company since 2020. The founding team I've sort of known for a really long time. It really all goes back to the vision of our CEO, Brian Snyder, who I think he first brought the idea of what is now Lit Communities to me 8-9 years ago, really focusing on, at the time, he was, doing a lot of engineering and builds for the large MSOs of the world. And he saw a lot of these tier 2, tier 3 cities getting neglected. And so really, he saw the opportunity, right? Just because there's not as much money to be made, it doesn't mean that there's not both opportunity with the ability to make some money off of it, right? So he saw a business opportunity and went for it. I mean, since then, we've scaled dramatically. We've gone under a couple of rounds of funding. And right now, we are really building at breakneck speed, right? I mean, this is the time, right? It's all about building as fast as you can to fill in all those gaps. So we've been pretty hyper focused on Ohio and Texas and Pennsylvania for the time being.
Okay. Guys, get in.
Yeah, let me ask you.
I'd like to ask you, John, what is it exactly that you do in a community?
Yep. Yeah. So we are an internet service provider. So we have done a great deal of consulting work, in the past as Lit Communities, and then our local brands, Lit Fiber, are actually internet service providers that are locally branded. So, in Medina, Ohio, where our anchor network is, it's, Lit Fiber Medina. So it's a locally branded network. One of the things that really sticks out, when you're working with these more tight-knit communities is, we have local customer service, local presence. There's really an awful lot of, opportunities for jobs locally. Though our corporate team is mostly remote, but what we're focused on doing is setting up these new markets where then we're growing the markets from within. And in most cases, and well, really in every case, what we're really trying to do is not just go show up and apply for permits, right? That's all you really got to do, right? So we really try to make sure that we're engaged with that community. We have a lot of private-public partnerships under our belt, and that's been a way and a vehicle of success, mostly just because we're able to engage with the communities engage with us. There's skin in the game from both sides, right? It's not empty promises. It's all right, let's work together to get this done.
So you do the last mile, and that includes laying fiber, actually making a signal available in homes, that kind of thing?
That's correct. And then in a couple of situations, if there's already a community that's built some middle mile, or they're going to be building middle mile, we'll try to leverage what the community already has so that there's a benefit to the community. And then of course there's a benefit for us, because if we can leverage middle mile that's owned by the community, which communities own middle mile all over the place because they connect their anchor institutions, their schools, all that sort of stuff. And so if we can leverage that to bring costs down for the build, and then at the same time have that help the community itself. That's
are there a lot of I will shut up after this, but are there a lot of communities that don't have Wi-Fi?
That don't. Oh yeah. There's a lot of communities that don't have Wi-Fi, especially the tier 2, tier 3 cities. There's a lot. There's definitely a gap of Wi-Fi connectivity. But it's really sort of depends, right? Some communities surprise you. It really a lot of times just depends on how forward thinking leadership within that community has been to sort of put these things in place, and how much they got in front of them, either pre-pandemic or right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they got serious about thinking about what they wanted to do with connectivity.
Thank you,
John. Let me see if I can wrap my my mind around your business model.
Yep.
And let's talk about trends. We like to do research. You want to do a bookstore where you go to places in the old days where people like to, look at books. And even if on the internet, there's a correlation between ordering the books and love of books. My question is one of the trends, the movement of, or let's say the staying home of people. So therefore, they need better services. So let's take an average city in Ohio. where there's people come in from small towns, right, to work. That's the tradition, right? And even in Austin, Texas, we have mature small cities around us. And in the South, we don't call them suburbs. We just call them small cities, I might add. What's the trend? And are you taking advantage of this trend of people who are not moving into the city or driving into the city to work, staying home at work, and therefore need more infrastructure vis-a-vis broadband? You have any trend data on that? It's small cities, right? Uh, so therefore, you say that you can certainly create revenue, but we know that revenue must create it. So what's the trend? Are people staying in small cities and working at home? So therefore, a restaurant in small cities would boom, and also Wi-Fi would get better. Uh, the local drugstore would get better. What's the trends that you see to build your business model around?
Yeah, well, I mean, work from home is definitely a big one. It's certainly, I mean, just from a sales perspective, I'll be straight with you. My background is sales. Right now, this is the first time I've really had operations in my title, and I think almost everything I've ever done, I've been very, very um, focused on how to sell it, and the trend of work from home. I mean, just anecdotally, I can tell you from working. We recently did a sales blitz in one of our markets, and and we tried to do this, during, strategically during the day, really seeing the numbers, who's answering. Well, a third of those who answered the door, not the third of people answered the door, but a third of those who answered the door were actually working from home. And that to me is a huge. I mean, that's anecdotally that's a pretty big jump, right? You're seeing more and more people doing that. I think we're not as much. You're going to have communities, and we've seen this for years, who have been trying to promote telework, and I think there's ways to do that. Some communities have done it through, like, bonuses, right? If you relocate here, we'll give you a bonus, right? And we have high speed connectivity. So there's different ways that folks do it, but I think the bigger opportunity is really retention. It's about retaining the future generations, and when these communities, if they can message correctly the improvements that they're making in their community, that they are not only catching up, but there's really an opportunity for these communities that have been struggling to catch up to actually leap forward, right? I mean, if you have the right type of local visionary leadership, you can really move a community forward, and that's going to, cause a lot of retention. I mean, I've seen statistics on these towns that rely on tourism, right? And you look at, once they brought Wi-Fi into some of these tourist cities, you see how much longer the average stay is. And it's really no different trying to keep kids in the community, right? It just opens up so many more opportunities economically, and just convenience.
Well, John, there's no doubt that the interstate highway, which is a major kind of deal that we did, had a great impact on communities. As a matter of fact, it was more likely to kill communities as the interstate bypass the cities on blue highways. So let me just ask the question in a different kind of way. Do you think that broadband would have the impact of restructuring the population density in America? Do you think that broadband will decrease the density in cities as small cities grow? And do you think that broadband might have the opposite effect of what the interstate highways had?
Yeah, I think that it's a nuanced question, right? Because I think the pandemic really put a lot of focus on what could be done remotely, right? So within the context of a community, I think a lot of folks who not only were restricted in their cities, right, because there's a great density of people, right? So there was a lot more caution tend to be put in place, restrictions put in place in those areas, which, folks didn't like. And then on top of it, it's more expensive to live there. People went and visited, went back home, went back. I mean, so many people I met who were working over the course of, especially the first couple of years, people were working from all over the place. A lot of people that lived in the city, went home to be with their loved ones, right? So I think just the mentality of that will really restructure the way cities work, and really I think it will spread out the population a lot more. But at the same time, I think I don't think that connectivity necessarily is what drives people to cities. I think you're going to see, I think you're going to see a lot of wealth certainly move into more remote areas because there is connectivity, right? Like, you know, they don't have to pay $100,000 to get that remote property hooked up, right? So I think you see that. But when it comes to really ultimately restructuring cities, I think people go to cities for a lot of reasons. And a lot of it is to sort of be where the action is. And I think as much criticism as New York gets, Silicon Valley gets, I mean, folks are still moving there with their dreams of startups and their dreams of, right? I mean, you know, as someone who moved to California young to join a startup in my early 20s, the appeal of that adventure is certainly still alive and well. And there's just something about that rush that I don't think the internet's going to change, but I may not have my pulse on the youth of today.
Let me just ask one more question. As we put broadband all over America, will some of it be portable? For example, if you go back in the early days of the internet and you go to different countries, there were ships that were boats that would come up and provide the internet for certain people in remote areas. How you visualize? Is it multifaceted? Is it just one lane of a broadband like we've done traditionally, or do you see big trucks moving into into rural areas and providing the technology for people to hook up and get online?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll happen. I think you'll see, you know, mobile towers. You know, we just during some of the consulting work we did early pandemic, we worked with communities that were purchasing, you know, towers, right, portable towers, so that they could connect certain population centers. You know, realizing that there was, you know, they could repurpose those if, you know, there was connectivity down in a certain area, you know, or a school, you know, down at a school or something like that. Certainly. But I also think, you know, as much as, you know, I'm not like, I don't think the answer is like the Starlinks of the world, but it was definitely a game changer, right? If you don't live in like a deep valley, the amount of coverage opportunities that were open, and will continue to open. I mean, I can tell you there are some places that I drive through in Florida. I live in South Florida. When I leave the state, I mean, you drive through some areas once you start going north that you just know there's just nothing, right? There's levels of poverty that are restricting the connectivity. The buildings are abandoned. I think cities like that can really be revived because typically you have these communities that you maybe relied on one particular you know, type of manufacturing, some industry that then has been, you know, sort of phased out, and then sort of people left the town, and the town wasn't big enough to sort of sustain itself. So, you know, I think that you'll see through a mix of technologies, although I do think eventually fiber will be ubiquitous, just because of the nature of the technology, because it's a passive technology, because, you know, when you're making adjustments, you're making them to the technologies. You're not having to rip the fiber out, right? So I think that it's here to stay.
Okay, thank you.
John, tell us. So you mentioned Ohio and Texas. So tell us, how do you pick a community? What goes into that? Is there a criteria that you guys have, or are you thinking about building a criteria? How does that work?
Yeah, well, we definitely have a criteria. I'm not the person who's doing that anymore. I would say it's become much. I mean, we've been now around. We're 4 years running, right? So our methodology. I mean, it's very clear the type of community we want to work with now. I think when we started, I can tell you how it started. There was a list of 150 communities that, you know, Brian had hand qualified. I mean, like I said, he had that list when he first brought it to me 10 years ago, right? I mean, he had the communities were what this was all based on. It was all based on there are still these communities that have a need. And so that's really the number one. I would say we really want to work with communities that want to work with us. You know, in some instances, a community, they just have, I don't want to say bigger fish to fry, because I don't think there's a lot more bigger fish than connectivity, but different, right? Different communities, it's just not focused on that. They're like, look, there's a way that ISPs can come in. We're not getting involved in that, right? And then we would really like to work with a community that sees that passionately understands that there's areas of need and wants to do something about it. And I say that is the single thing that stands out is a community that has the passion, because we have a great passion about connectivity. I mean, this vision has been building for a long time. If that's not matched by the community itself, it's hard for us to, you know, to deliver, right?
Sure.
But you know, but that's not to say where there is a community that needs and wants to change enough, that absolutely can be enough as well. So I would say that there's a type of community we like to work with, but in reality, it's where folks need the connectivity.
Now, in addition to fiber to the home, to the business, to the hospital, to the office, what else are you offering, or what else are you thinking about offering to the community?
Yeah, we do offer telehealth service. We've partnered with a local hospital system in Ohio, and we have a solution almost there for our Texas market, and then we're looking at something very similar in Pennsylvania, as far as like working with a local hospital system to offer, you know, that service. But we're trying to build what we're calling an open application network, and really the vision there is, you know, as a provider, it makes sense to partner on ancillary services, right? There's a lot of things that are often sold alongside. Telephone's number one, but right, you have video of some sort, you have security devices, I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff that come with it. Although we will have channel partnerships, we're really trying to open it up and allow a lot of providers, these secondary providers, especially those like in who may be starting up, right? I mean, the way that businesses sort of start and launch these days, right? I mean, it's much quicker, and so we have a vision of trying to create an ecosystem where we're not just bringing connectivity to these communities. It's really about, we're trying to show them what the connectivity can bring, right? How the technology is changing, all the different applications and services that can. And so we're trying to make it a little more open instead of just exclusive partnerships on a certain product or service. We're going to try to expand that so that there's more offerings, services.
So John, what do you see in this connected world? How do you see business models? I mean, if you were to give a talk on business models in the connected world, business models in the age of broadband, we know how we shop on the internet, but when we move to small towns and we're talking about revitalizing the rural areas, what would you say to a city when you went in to say, you know, your factory left here in Florida, 30 years ago, and we are here to revitalize your city, much like we're trying to revitalize the Florida Gators. I'm an LSU guy, so sorry about that. What would you tell a city manager? What would you tell the governor? What would you tell the mayor? I mean, how would it change it? You mentioned that it could change it, and as being over business models, how do you see it changing?
Well, there's kind of a lot there. So
you're selling to me the broadband. I am now the mayor of Clutcherville, Florida.
Well, yeah, I mean, usually it's not too hard. I mean, really, the sale ends up being, in most cases, like why you'd want to partner with us, right? Versus somebody else. Because in most cases, I mean, at this point, I don't know that there really is a community that doesn't understand that connectivity is a huge need, right? And I would say if the pandemic didn't shake folks, the money that's available did, right? So there's a lot, there's a lot of forced thinking about it. But and I mean, the standard stuff. I mean, you retain your people. For rural communities, I mean, the offering of telehealth, just the ability to have that, healthcare institutions. I don't know of a community that has a healthcare institution in it that didn't hear, right, the challenges that were being faced there. It really ends up being, around the type of technology, why you'd want to go with fiber. If you're going to make the investment, any type of investment, even if it's just time or some sort of in-kind contribution in order to get a network done, go with the future-proof technology, right? You could band-aid a solution. You could try to, I mean, folks were doing all sorts of stuff.
I can see in my house, for example, if I have a health problem, I just go to the wall and push it, and up comes an AI and gives me an analysis and tells me what to do. and then I'm fine. So I think that it goes, in addition to the cities themselves, it goes to people in farmhouses and that's isolated. So all of a sudden, the AI is bringing all of the services of the city to my isolated home. And so I'm never alone. So if you can imagine with me a wall, as I said before, I wake up, I have a hard headache. I go touch my wall, and up jumps an AI doctor. And the doctor asks me what's wrong, and I tell the doctor, I have a headache. And then he said, okay, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. We have it delivered to you. Do you need a helicopter to pick you up? And all of it's connected. Because all of that is a business model. And I see it goes out from, it's much like going out from the meter. So the home itself becomes a place where everything that you need to matriculate, say medical, we're talking about the medical stuff, is provided, all the information. And you're literally talking to an AI doctor, right? And I think that's the beauty of what you're doing. So when you say that there is what will it bring to them? It would bring to them things they cannot even imagine now. Cannot even imagine. I would like for Llewellyn King, our expert in AI, by the way. Let me just announce this: he's writing an introduction to the greatest AI book, mainly because his association with Andres Cavallo and John Sibley Butler. So let me introduce him, he's an expert.
Absolutely. My association is carrying me forward to wealth and recognition beyond my wildest dreams. I want to ask you, John, do you have a problem with the supply chain?
No, we have not had problems with the supply chain. I would say that we're very fortunate in that we're backed by private capital, so that hasn't been an issue, right? So, but also our supply partner, right? We really have, we were ahead of the supply chain. That's the best way I can put it. I mean, you do have some long wait times, but what you really need is a proactive partner who's saying, hey, I know you use these cabinets. Just so you know, I see they're running out, right? Like this might be moving to a 6-month, timeline. That's really what it ends up being. It's internal logistics. There's a lot more places to get things. People have gotten creative. And I would say if anything else, for fiber itself, the channels for fiber have opened, because you've seen a lot of, you see manufacturers like repurpose, add, build, right? And especially with all the Buy American stuff that's coming down with BEAD, there's been a lot of, concerted effort to pump manufacturing.
John, who pays you? What are your channels of revenue?
Subscribers, right? We do have a little bit of consulting revenue. Consulting was a much larger mix, of course, when you're starting out, right? You're sort of leaning on your expertise. We were also developing the markets. That at one point, all these markets, Pennsylvania and Texas were at one point, RFPs that we had responded to. But right now it's really we're focused on subscriber growth, which fortunately in the markets we're going into is we're typically first in fiber, so we're something that they've been looking for.
About 25 years ago, there was a huge boom in laying fiber. I did a conference in Houston for a publication I used to own. And we heard a lot about black fiber, companies including Enron, that had rushed in, laid fiber, and hadn't got a market for it. They were ahead of the game. Is that a problem still? Was that fiber ever used, or has that been abandoned?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's dark fiber all over the country, right? So I would say at that point they probably sold it off to somebody who's going to find a way to sell it. There's just so much. I mean, you're always there's a lot of middle mile long haul providers that that's what they specialize in, right? Is providing a circuit to ISPs like us. So I'd say that they all got good sales teams. I'll tell you that, because I do get quite a few inbound folks trying to sell me middle mile fiber who are, you know, they have intel on where we're building, and they're like, hey, we got a circuit here, we got a circuit here, right? So there's definitely aggressive sales, but I think now is the time. I mean, if there at one point was a misguided investment, it's going to be paying off now. I'll tell you that in the case of, you know, we did a project in Pennsylvania that, you know, we ended up using 20-year-old conduit that was negotiated in when a provider was putting some fiber down, you know, and the city finally used it, right?
A lot of the smaller electric utilities, particularly the national rural electric co-ops, or sorry, I should just said electric co-ops, try to get into the fiber business because they felt this was compatible with providing electric service. But I never heard the conclusion there. Did it work? Are there a lot of utilities providing, I mean, electric utilities providing fiber services to the home?
Yeah, there are. I think it really depends on they're structured. I think in most cases, the ones that are really the rule, like nobody else is going to come out here. I do think that a lot of rural electric co-ops looked at it as like, well, this is a really great opportunity for revenue, but then sort of realized like, well, this is a whole other thing, right? Because the whole support and operational model, though you may have poles, which is great, right? That's a big portion of what you're trying to do. And if you own those poles, you're going to bring down your cost, right? But you also have to build a whole bunch of just internal back-end infrastructure. So in some cases, like we're partnering in Ohio with a rural electric co-op that goes through a couple of counties where, you know, we just worked out something where they realized, hey, you know, we don't really want to lay all this fiber, right? We want, so we just worked out a deal, right? So, but there definitely are those who are doing it, and I would say though they're mostly really in the really remote areas where they realize, you know, if nobody does it, you know, if we don't do it, nobody will, at least not for a long time.
I buy my Wi-Fi at a high price from my telephone company. Is that common, and how do you interface with the telephone companies?
Well, you know, we do offer, you know, VoIP telephone service. You know, so, you know, we're a registered CLEC, right? When we're offering internet service as along with telephone. You know, we don't really interact. I mean, phone companies with cellular plans, we're just not in that world, right? We're just not in that that cellular world. And then when it comes to Wi-Fi, I mean, at least in the markets we're in, we're not registering the telephone providers as like, you know, our core competitors or anything like that.
Are you benefiting from the government's infrastructure spending?
Oh yeah, we are, and I would say the main way that we are benefiting is not dollars in our pocket. It's been dollars in the pockets of the communities we're working with, right? So that they're able to put money into their own infrastructure that then benefits everybody. But I would say mostly it's just the national attention and conversation around connectivity. I'd say that just the game has changed, that like everyone you talk to, unless they were living under a rock, they understand that there's a national conversation about connectivity, and that's why you're calling, right? That's why you're there.
I hand you over to the smartest man in the room, Dr. Butler. And we know this because he has an affidavit to that effect signed by himself.
You know, that's the best thing thank you for the compliment. That's the best thing you've said. As my old grandpappy used to say, it's a sad dog that won't waggle his own tail. So thank you very much for the compliment. I'm really intrigued about, because we do a lot of quote economic development stuff, right? And I've been intrigued with the different kinds of business models that have developed over the internet, which for the most part, if you think about it, a lot of them were the free model, right? I mean, it's the old newspaper model where you give the content away and then you get your revenue from advertising. it's the old newspaper model, and that was also the old television model, right? So what intrigued, when we talked in coffee shops, we would say anything that's digital would be free in the long run. So the musicians would have a tough time, the artists would have a tough time, book companies would have a tough time. Anything digital will be free. So I understand the connectivity. I'm trying to understand how the revenue sources and taxes, right, will look different on cities. Because as they revitalize themselves, in the old days, it was Main Street, people going on Main Street and shopping on Main Street, and switching Main Street pharmacy stores to bars and to the party areas, much like we did with 6th Street in Austin here. So I'm trying to get my head around 20 years, what would a revenue, where would a revenue come from rural areas, especially the small cities themselves? Do we have to redo the revenue structure in America? I mean, it's just interesting to me. Do you have you thought about that?
Well, I'll say though, it goes beyond that. Even just, as someone who's I've worked for startups, it's not my first startup, and just looking at that whole world of how over their skis, some companies get, and everything can fall through. I mean, I look at, even telehealth right now, but so much telehealth relies heavily on Teledoc. Anybody who's watched Teladoc stock over the last, 3 years, I mean, volatile is I get a generous way to explain it, right? It's when you have these, everybody has that mentality that digital's free, but that doesn't mean that they have a clear path to revenue. And I think that there's a lot of applications, and it just like, when ride sharing first came out, I mean, we've all seen what's happened to ride share costs, right? They've gone way up, right? I mean, reality set in. Anybody who's watching what's happening in the streaming world, right? They're starting to have the same problems that, we can sit and complain about the big cable companies. There's still licensing fees, there's still royalties, and now as we see what's going on in Hollywood, there's a writer's strike that's only going to be more fees that are going to end up coming out of it, right? Content is expensive. And so there are still so many business models in my mind that need to be proved, that we're currently been engaged with for 5 to 10 years at this point, that still aren't clearly making revenue. So I would say that it's a hard question to answer, because I don't think we have what we're doing currently figured out.
I think that Hollywood is in trouble, as Llewellyn would tell you. I think Hollywood is in trouble. I think actors are in trouble. I think that you can do all kind of movies now in all kind of different kind of ways, and I think that would be one of the greatest changes. I mean, it's just like when the interstate. I mean, when the interstate hit, if you were not near the interstate, you're in trouble. Okay, yeah. When the Wi-Fi hit, if you're a musician and everything became digital, you're in trouble. Okay, and I just think that whether it's acting or whether it's all of those things that require people and entertainment, I think they're in trouble.
Oh yeah, I mean, they already saw, pretty dramatic cuts in pay scale when streaming came out in the first place. I mean, right, like pay has only dropped further and further. I mean, that's why they're striking, right? I mean, these used to, you could be if you're on TV, you were a millionaire. Well, there's a lot of people on TV that are far from millionaires, right, already. And it's as they want to get paid more, it's understandable. And but the balance of how actors in Hollywood even interact with the companies distributing content or making content, right? It's the whole structure of the business is still in a great deal of flux.
I'm curious, John. Do you see? I mean, you are what I would call it a traditional internet service provider focused on smaller cities. Let's just leave it at that. When I look at what's happening with business models, when I look at Netflix started as a streaming service, well, it's a CD delivery service, then a streaming service, but now they're really a producer of content, right? And it seems like all these companies that are in the communications area, end up wanting to be in the content creation. And in the internet, the content creation, it's either shopping at Costco or Amazon or Best Buy or eBay, or it's watching movies that are created and, you know, put together by others. Do you think there is room, or you think there is a day where Amazon, for example, would pay for the internet access on your subscription model, because they would want you to broadcast certain content? Or what are the thoughts of that? Or where do you think things are going to be 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never actually thought about it from that perspective, but I mean, absolutely, I could see the world. I mean, anybody who's ever bought one of those cheap Amazon Fire tablets know why they're so cheap, right? Because it's loaded with advertising. I mean, it's pushing. It gets to the point where you're like, okay, well, this is what I paid for. I paid for all this advertisement, and it wouldn't surprise me if they would. You know, I mean, Amazon's definitely in the world of connectivity. They're looking at it, they care about it, just like Microsoft. Really, they look at it, they care about it. I know, you know, I wish I remember the whole story now. But when I know there was when Facebook tried to introduce Facebook into India at first, I believe that's what they were offering, was free internet. I know there was quite a bit of backlash on that from that particular move, but I think it shows that they clearly worked out a model where they realize if we give them free internet, they're going to use Facebook all day long. Right? So I could see something. Yeah, I wouldn't. That only sparked because you just said it, but I'd actually never thought about that. I think that we could absolutely see that. There's a reason. I mean, Amazon's a key example. I mean, how many of our lives revolve around Amazon, right? And I'll tell you, I would never buy Amazon Prime to watch the video. I would never watch I wouldn't buy it for the video service, but I watch it because I like the free shipping. You know, like, so it's they figured it out.
You know, John, that's the business model is you give the pen away and make your money on the ink. You give the printer away and make your money on the ink.
Well, and I think
it's the same kind of draw where it's a model that's free. So let's make printers very, very cheap and over the lifetime of the printer, but the ink is very, very expensive. So it's a free model. And again, this is what newspaper. This is how newspaper started out, and this is how we could have so many great newspaper reporters, because the average. I'm sorry, Llewellyn, you had a comment to make. You're
muted,
and I did not mute you, although I wanted to.
No. Okay. Well, you have some interesting points here. Sometimes you actually stumble on the truth, Johnny. The internet providing is getting to be, there's more demand for more material, more demand for more content, and less pay for content providers. Journalists know this, TV producers know this, I know this. We're not gaining in this race, although contrary to economic expectation, we're in greater demand because there's all these channels to be filled, but the revenue is very small. And as the writers' strike punches up, there is great uncertainty about the future. What will artificial intelligence do to providing entertainment, providing basic journalism, like covering sports events, results, that kind of thing, the sort of thing your local paper has about the local school results, all of those things. But a major news organization, the Associated Press, the New York Times, are into AI. They're using it to provide some of the content. As time goes on, they'll use more of it, and that's, for us, very threatening. Also, there's some really dramatic and strange developments in India. 2 stations have replaced newscasters, anchors, with virtual figures who look nice, read the news, and then, what is truly frightening, will turn to a reporter and say, Johnny, what do you think of that? And it's a real live reporter talking to a faux newscaster. And if that doesn't disturb us, people like myself who sell words for a living, nothing will do it. So we don't know the future, and nobody knows the future, and the providers don't know the future. Nothing lasts for very long now. For a while, television, if you owned a television station, it was, and very famously, somebody said, licensed to print money. It is not anymore because a lot of the viewers are now watching on the screen. They're watching something else. They're getting it somewhere else. But along the way, some money has to be generated to keep this whole information edifice standing. It's a time of huge transition in everything, accelerated by technology, which has always played a major role in the information world. If it was newspapers, it was the invention about 1893, I think it was, of the linotype machine. It made producing them much easier and quicker. The cables brought in more news from around the world, but it also coincided very fortuitously with general education in the US and in Europe, where it became mandated that children had to go to school about 20 years before that revolution. We're into a time of another revolution. We don't even know the parameters of the revolution, let alone the destiny, its destination.
Now, Llewellyn, you're exactly right. It's amazing how you can just come up on my great ideas and pontificate on them. It's just a great, I just love it. But let me just say this, how right Llewellyn is. Because right now, for example, if I look at these kind of shows. Okay, if I want to learn about what's going on, I look at these kind of shows. So I would look at, for example, Ole Miss playing Alabama this weekend in football. I won't go to the national media. I'll go to the local YouTube guys that absolutely know about Alabama, and they know about Ole Miss. And then the same thing with investing. It's just, as Llewellyn said, the amount of content for me to choose from is just off the scale. Now the question is, how do you get revenue when everybody's looking for content and unwilling to pay? Because
and
I
the
think
quality of the content.
The quality of the content, yeah. So it's pretty interesting, and maybe we have all kind of things happening now. But Llewellyn is right. The content is there, but how can we say that, hey, this content is okay? Remember that in the old days, the newspaper editor said, right, these stories they're good stories. We have our sources. That doesn't happen now. I mean, there's no accountability. There's no accountability, right? So the announcement is made, and everybody said, oh, that's a conspiracy. This is the truth. But people like that. I mean, there's hardly no accountability. Where's Walter Cronkite saying that's the way it is? Nobody would. Well, you don't remember Walter Cronkite, but nobody would question him, right? Yeah. Even if I look at 60 Minutes now, it's pretty wild. So I think you're right in the sweet spot of the future. But also the sweet spot means that in our society, we need to figure out how to pay people, where they're going to work, kind of jobs they have in this connected society.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even really touched on AI, but AI is far from just a buzzword. It's going to, it's already changed so much about the way that folks work, and I think interjecting AI into all areas of life and business is going to. There's going to have to be a lot of retraining. I think jobs will change. There are just so many things. Anybody just use something as simple as ChatGPT is like, you're like, okay, well, this is real. Like, this is a real thing. This is not a disappointment, And
John, don't forget 3D printing.
Yeah.
When you combine AI with 3D printing, wow. And of course, they're making humans now that look human, sound humans, right? And they can take my voice and put it on any human now. So they could have Llewellyn's voice coming from a robot, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing what they can do. And as you said, the combination for the business plans, they're just, nobody knows what they're going to be. It's going to be awesome.
Well,
right?
yeah.
So
when
No,
you
go
talk
ahead.
about one of the things I wanted to mention about Amazon, which they did, the pivot they did was so strange, and I think it really changed a lot. At least maybe I'm wrong, and they were not so original. Is that they took something like shipping and connected it with something that was seemingly very unrelated, which was video, and how they connected to how, oh, I want this one thing, I kind of want this other thing, right? Like the way they can lock you into that. And I think those complex, interesting relationships are going to be the future of media, right? They're going to be a future of a lot of, they're going to be the source paying for a lot of this stuff. I think, you know, that's how they're going to do it, right? I hope it's not just big companies get bigger and bigger, right? But you can see that how creative they could get, and why, because of the size of Amazon, they could get creative like that and lose for a long time before they became, you know, at least Amazon is profitable at this point, right?
Yeah.
You know, you make such an interesting point. Amazon is an example of something that electric utilities have abandoned, and that is vertical integration. This is a Kindle. This is where I read books, lots of them, because it's portable. But they started by selling books. That was the beginning of Amazon. Ordinary printed books. Publishers love them. They don't love them so much now because you can actually print the book straight off of Amazon. But this was a very interesting escalation. And there have been, you know, this damage along the way. Bookstores are suffering or have gone out of business. The small, you know, neighborhood bookstore is almost extinct because of Amazon and other pressures like that. Libris, I think, was the lesser of the two, and didn't get the whole chain going, the whole vertical integration that Amazon has been able to achieve in books and other things. So you're so right. They managed to get transportation, delivery, warehousing, and procurement all lined up, and that's extraordinary.
Remember that
it's
like that too, but just wait, they will be replaced in the future.
Yeah, I have no doubt they cannot go on forever in the monopolistic way. Although I must say they have been a great saver, especially during the pandemic.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Quick point to make here, and we wrap it up. But you know, bookstores to me are an interesting phenomena of the transition to digital, the digital world, because of the following fact. Do you guys know the second largest fast delivery service store in the world after McDonald's? Do you know what comes after McDonald's who has the most number of stores and customers after McDonald's? You guys know? The Starbucks. So a Starbucks is what? A place where people go and hang out and drink coffee while they're working.
Right.
Can I add a codicil there? It also is extraordinarily interesting because they sell the idea of value added, but they don't. It's coffee, but somehow that it perceived value. Perceived value is why people pay a lot of money for a scent or for a kind of automobile, and they've really taken it to a very utilitarian product, coffee, and added a perception of value, which is probably not justified.
But my point to you is that, and if you look at co-working spaces, bookstores were selling coffee and were co-working spaces before Starbucks and co-working spaces existed. Yeah. And why did they get killed?
That's right.
So it's kind of fascinating, John, that you are tapping into all these new communities in broadband. My last question to you before we go is, what is enough? Is 100 megabits per second enough? Is it a gig? Is it 10 gig? Is it 100 gig? Do you guys have a sense of that? if the metaverse is gonna conquer the world, how many gigs do I need for the metaverse?
Well, if you're going to do the metaverse, then well, a lot of the metaverse is going to be a lot less. It's going to be just as much about how close is that infrastructure to you, right? I mean, infrastructure itself. I think if we're talking about mass adoption and support of the metaverse, you're talking about servers close again, right? Like it's not just about the cloud; it's about like how close is its infrastructure, how close is that internet exchange where this data is coming from. So I definitely think you have that. I would say, I mean, like our base level package is 300 by 300. I think that a person could still get away with like 100 by 100. I think what becomes more important, that symmetrical speed, I think has become much more important with just how many things we're uploading over the internet, the size of documents, the expectation. I mean, I know like I have 6 children. My children, when they are trying, they don't understand why it takes long to like upload a video versus a document. To them, it should all just go up, right? It should just why is it not there already? And I think that with all the work from home, that becomes much more important. I think my prediction is you'll be looking at 10 gig by 10 gig as a pretty normal thing in the future. I think right now, the way we're going into a market planning on knowing we're going to eventually scale to 10 gig, right? I mean, we're already seeing it because the day of the gig package, I think the next 5 years, I mean, the 2, 4, 5 gig packages are not going to be out of the realm to see. And I think they'll start with gamers, but I think as we integrate more and more, telehealth is a great example, right? I mean, when they start getting more remote devices for telemedicine approved, and you're like, you're really doing inspections and things and instruments using it, and you need that connectivity, that bandwidth is going to be, so important. And then not to mention autonomous vehicles, which I think are just going to take, if you talk, I mean, I worked in that industry for a while, knowing how they're trying to do real live changes in the cloud for change detection, and like if there's suddenly a pothole or a sinkhole opens up or something, to do these things in real time. I mean, just the data already, I mean, it's terabytes a day, but that's for an average car time, which is like what, 2.5 hours a day. That's how 2 terabytes of data. And then you look at in San Francisco with them just allowing opening up of these 24-hour service now of autonomous vehicle. I mean, how much data is that, right? So I think that infrastructure near the roadway, whether it's 5G or 6G or whatever Wi-Fi technology exists at that point, will end up being really, really important, and we'll laugh at the days, just like we laugh at the days that we tolerated dial-up speeds. We'll laugh at the days that we survived with a mere gig.
Yeah. So, John, in closing, what's next for you and the company in the next 6 months? What's ahead of you guys? What's going on?
Next 6 months, we're really you're gonna see a lot. We've really started aggressively building, so a lot of homes, right? A lot of things opening. Where my personal focus is really on trying to make sure that our sales organization, our customer success organization, our marketing organization are perfectly fine-tuned in the sense of that all the data is being leveraged and shared. A lot of it is just systems and scale, right? We're building a lot of homes, and I think that if you were to talk to me at this time next year, I wouldn't doubt if our company's twice the size, because that's really how fast that we've been growing.
Wow,
that's great.
It's good to hear.
Gentlemen, final thoughts.
I think, as I said before, you're at the very, very center of the future, and the business models will be there for you. And good luck, and just create it. Stay creative, and you will also have to buy some companies to add to your company going along too.
Yeah.
Well, I think everything is in transition, so I'm glad of those things that are unchanged, like the efficacy of strong drink.
I can't take it.
All right. Well, John, thanks for being with us today. Looking forward to sharing the video with you, and all the best.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me. I really appreciated this opportunity.
Very
Absolutely.
interesting, John. Thank you.
Yep,
Thank
you all
you.
have a good day. Thank you.
Johnny, take us away.
At a time when the world seems to be spinning hopelessly out of control. They're deceivers and believers, and the only between us, there seems now no place to go. Well, it's the same for so long. It's right and it's wrong.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Johnny.
All right. Take care. And, I'm gonna let me know that it doesn't cost them anything to. I mean, we just